Good evening. I'd like to call the Airport Advisory Board meeting for April 10th to order. Could we start with a roll call?
Matt Gibson. Here. Board Member Charles Schilling. Here. City Council Member Matthew Kaufman. Airport Manager Levi Brown.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, you guys. Let's go ahead and open up our first public invited to be heard. Remember that it's 5 minutes in length. State your name and your address. Direct your comments to the board. And keep in mind that we cannot answer back to any kind of questions. We don't do a sign up, so I just open it up. And if you'd like to speak, go ahead and stand and come forward. Dr. Grunsfeld.
Can't help myself. John Grunsfeld. My business is at 229 Airport Road on the Vance Brand Longmont Airport. And I just have to say, today was one of those days with reasonably clear skies, you know, the Indian Peaks, Long's Peak covered in snow. That just reminds me that the Vance Brand Longmont Airport is one of the prettiest, if not the prettiest airport in the nation. And we should all be very proud of it. I see Levi's probably going to talk about it, but not only should we be proud of it in the city of Longmont, but the Colorado Department of Transportation Aviation Division charters a study every 5 years, and the 2020 to 2024 economic impact statement just came out. And the Longmont Airport, according to the Colorado Department of Transportation and the study that they did, generates $73 million of economic, 73.6, let's call it $74 million of economic value to the city of Longmont and the environment. I don't spend a major fraction of that, but with my business, quite a substantial investment in the city of Longmont. There are, if you do a Google search, there are currently about 12 cities the size of Longmont in the U.S. that are trying to get funding to build an airport like the Vance Brand Longmont Airport. And the funding for that that's required is over $100 million per city. And they're vying for federal funds to try and get their own airports. And so my recommendation, in the strongest possible terms, as you know, is that we should all be big supporters of the Longmont Airport because the Longmont Airport is a big supporter of our community. So thanks.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
Hey, evening. Chair, members, Advisory Board, Scott Stewart, 229 Grant Street. Let me just start by saying I'm really disappointed in the aviation community and how it interacts with those of us that live in the community. If someone complains about the noise, aviation community is not shy about speaking up on social media or the local paper, telling people that the airport was here first. And why did you buy a house so close to the airport? It's the airport that's at odds with the community that it's supposed to serve. Just seems really odd to me. Pattern work. Pattern seems to be causing the majority of the noise complaints. Not all of them, but the majority of it. I was looking at some of the overlay maps of the pattern and the actual flight path, and the actual flight paths that exceed well beyond what is presented on the map. I understand that more planes in the pattern will push that pattern out, but it doesn't even appear that a single plane is able to fly the pattern in the tight circle that is represented on those maps. How many times is it expected during training flights to circle the airport? There's some literature that suggests 10 pattern operations. The actual number often exceeds 20 and even exceeds 30 with a single aircraft. This type of behavior does not lend itself to being a good community member. I don't live within the airport influence zone. They're flying over my house in a pattern. It's 3 miles away. It's supposed to be what, half mile, 3/4 of a mile? Take a turn, circle back. They're not even close to it. I've heard the effects being made on community. I've heard of the efforts being made to communicate fly-friendly guidelines by putting signs at the FBO, the gates, and even the fuel pumps. These are nice gestures, but let's be honest. The planes that causing much of this disturbance are not flying or they're not stopping at the FBO. They're not fueling here. They're not even entering through the gate. Direct communication with individual pilots and plane owners is needed to make the cause and effect, to be aware of the advice and advise them of our fly-friendly guidelines. I spoke at the city council about a off-site landing for a skydiver, and there was the lack of an incident report. City code writes this out. There's guidelines for it. What should happen or what have you. Airport manager should have this. I believe the airport manager should have copies of the standard operating procedures for this type of business at the airport. I'm not able to find the SOPs. I'd really like it. Maybe somebody can point me in the right direction for the SOPs so that we're doing that. That's not the only off-site landing for a skydiver. Emergencies happen. That's fine. They're allowed to do that, but they're also supposed to report it. That's it. Airport wasn't here first. Town was here first. My home was here first. What's happening now is not representative of what the airport was built for. Tighten it up. Figure out how to operate this thing so you're actually a part of the community and not in conflict with the community. What are you doing to not be in conflict with the community? We make the community jump through hoops in order to actually have an official filed report. What kind of garbage is that? FAA doesn't require that. It's a phone call. Why do I have to provide my name, my address, expose all of that? And let's be honest, we know there's pilots out there that'll take my address and fly over my house. There's a better way to leave the airport, and it's not over top of the city. A little too much flying over top of the city. Straight flights over top of the city. At one point, we talked about flying friendly, and it'd be nice if we started doing that again.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Lily. Do I put my address or address? What? Full name, Lily Ribeiro.
And your address.
My address is 1130 Windermere Circle, 80504. So I wanted to talk about the fact that I moved here in 2011 from Houston, and my family, however, has owned property in Longmont since the 60s. It's a mobile home park. It's called Weston Manor, and affordable housing. I think we're still one of the most affordable housing locations in Longmont, maybe the most. We keep our lot rent. It's still under $700 a month. It's for seniors. So my family has been involved in that for a long time, since, before I was born. And so I moved here in 2011, started taking over that, being involved in the community. And one of the reasons I was happy to move here was because there was an airport, and I have had this dream since I was a child to fly professionally. So the airport's been a great part of my life, and I've been able to accomplish that dream recently. I fly a private jet now as my other job, and wouldn't have been possible without the airport. I am a member of the community, and I have provided hundreds of hours of flight instruction, some of it for free to underserved members. And this is my community. When I'm flying over the community, I'm careful. I always try to be high enough. I don't want to disturb anyone on the ground. Those of us, especially those of us that live here, those of us that have planes here, we don't go out of our way to cause inconvenience to anybody. But we need to, training flights are important for proficiency, for safety, and there's a lot of airline pilots that have their airline jobs because of this airport. So I just want to express that it's made a big difference, and we do go out of our way. We don't aim to harm anybody or inconvenience anybody. We are, you won't find many more law-abiding citizens than pilots, because the law is our jobs. It's very important to us. So, anyone that's outside of the law, that's another matter, and that should be dealt with, obviously. But for those of us who do our best to pay our taxes, to contribute, to be good members of the community, that's not our goal. Our goal is not to inconvenience anybody or cause people, to lose sleep at night. I don't go out at night and do touch and goes at midnight. Like, I don't do that. Occasionally, maybe we do have our night currency requirements once every, we have to stay night current, 3 takeoffs and landings every 90 days to be night current. That's something we have to do to be night current, but that's pretty minor, and we don't, we can usually do that at a time when it's not going to be a huge problem to people around us. So we are aware we are law-abiding citizens, and I'm just personally very grateful that the airport's here, and it's been great. I've seen it change people's lives. I've seen it just, open up dreams for people that wouldn't have had access to that if they lived somewhere else. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Go ahead.
I'll say a few kind words. Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Brett Heidkamp, and 229 Hangar Road, Hangar 10-3. So just by saying that, I've got a lot of money tied up in a hangar in a plane, and it's out of the field. And I wanted to just address a couple things. I feel bad for the gentleman with the planes that's flying over his house or ranch or whatever it may be. And I don't know anybody that flies a 3-mile pattern, not to say it doesn't happen, but that is something that maybe could get looked into. I think that's the exception rather than the rule. I know when I first started training, which by the way, I can vouch for Lily, she was my instrument flight instructor. And I must have done something right because I did pass. But, flying a 172, a trainer, it's a really tight pattern. It's like a half mile. And going to a faster plane, it becomes wider. And I didn't know that when I was flying 172s. I thought, what are all these people flying like a mile out for? Why are they so wide, or why are they going so far on downwind? Well, they're flying a twin, or they're flying, much faster planes. So I fly a faster plane now. And of course, my patterns are a little bit wider. They're not 3 miles by any means. And I don't think I really pass over anybody's home. As far as departing over the city, a gentleman needs to realize that that's wind dependent. And I would like to address landing fees. I know that's been kind of a hot potato topic. And I apologize, this is my first meeting that I've attended. But landing fees would, I think, impact the resident airplanes, the people that are there. And if it's something that's going to be promulgated on planes that are not based out of Longmont, I think it's going to lead to people either masking their transponder IDs by the privacy that the FAA can do, which is an easy online sign up, or turning off their transponder. And turning it off would be even worse. A lot of times I come back in and there's 6, 8, sometimes 10 planes in that pattern. It's super busy at certain times. They're talking about like on a Sunday afternoon, there's a lot of people flying. And I understand if they're all flying over somebody's house, they'll get frustrated. I would say reaching out to the other flight schools that are not based there. It's not Aerosphere. It's not the flight schools that are there. It's the ones from the surrounding community, and just asking them, like approaching them as a community and saying, hey, can you guys cut down the number of flights that you do over Longmont? And as far as doing 30 touch and goes, during my entire training, there's no way I could do that. I would get poured out of the cockpit in a big pool of water. There's no way. So, 6, maybe 10 was my limit, and that's back when I was learning. And now it's, I hardly even do them, because I'm going somewhere. But having access to the airport has allowed me to realize business and pleasure. I do fly for my business, and I'm able to take my wife to some great places. We don't sit there in a pattern and do a bunch of touch and goes. But again, if people are, and that's where all this traffic is coming from, and granted there is traffic at times, I'm hoping that we could reach out to some of those flight schools and just ask them and maybe keep it local for them, not come to Longmont so much. So anyway, those are my ideas. Thanks for your time. Thanks for you guys doing what you do, and gals, and really appreciate that. Have a good one.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? We will have a second public invited to be heard later. Would you like to?
Good evening, Tara Menza. Excuse me. My husband and I have 2 airplanes at the hangar, so whatever the address is for the airport, you can put that down. But I just did want to address, I hope you guys are thinking as a board about Sundance, because Sundance is going to come to Boulder. That news article just was released, and that is going to be a huge economic driver for us here in Longmont. It's going to bring a lot of tourism, a lot of tax dollars, revenue, and it's a good opportunity for the airport to bring in some smaller aircraft that can't land at Boulder, maybe don't want to land in Broomfield, but want to be closer. And I'm super excited about that opportunity. We have a fabulous, beautiful airport. And I just would like to put that bug in your ear that I hope you guys are thinking about that, because it's going to be really exciting for an opportunity for us here in Longmont to showcase what a great spot Longmont is. And our airport is going to be right at the heart of that. So thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Last call? All right, we'll close public invited to be heard. Thank you. Next up is approval of the February 2025 minutes. And I can approve March as well, right? So I've got January. Did anybody see anything in the February minutes that needs to be addressed? No, I didn't either. And then did anybody see anything? We have minutes from the March meeting. We did have to adjourn, but there are officially minutes. It's basically opening the meeting, attendance, and closing it. So I will say, if you haven't seen the minutes, I didn't find anything wrong with those. Anybody else notice anything on the minutes? All right. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes for February and March?
I'll make a motion to approve February and March's minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve February and March's minutes.
May I get a second? Go ahead and hit your button. There you go. No. I can't see everybody on there. Go ahead and just say it loudly.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Thank you. We've moved and seconded to accept both the February and March minutes for the airport board. Next up is our update from our airport manager, Levi.
I'd like to start off by asking Councilmember Popkin to kind of introduce himself, as this is his first official Airport Advisory Board meeting, and also note for the record that he has joined the meeting.
Noted. And yes, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Is it working?
So which seat is your seat number?
I don't know.
There we go. Yes. Good evening. Sorry, I was at the last meeting, but because we didn't have quorum, it did not take effect there. Apologies, hit some traffic on the way back from Boulder. Matthew Popkin, council liaison here, and city council member for Ward 2. So that includes the airport as well. Happy to be here. I've been fielding a number of questions and emails already in the last couple months on various topics related to the airport, and continue to learn more, both for my own edification and for this board's. As I have updates from council or from other relevant actions from staff, I will gladly share them with this board, as well as happy to talk with any of you individually, or to the extent we are legally allowed, one or two in a group there. If you have any specific questions, excuse me, if you have any specific questions, happy to address those before, during, after the meeting, and look forward to supporting you guys on this board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Levi.
All right, first item for me, so Tyler can get home. Tyler has come to speak about the conclusion of our master drainage study for the south end of the airport, something we've been waiting here anxiously for quite a while now. And he was kind enough to volunteer to come to our Airport Advisory Board meeting this evening and kind of take us through some of the highlights of that. So a rarity for us here, a presentation tonight.
All right. Chair, members of the board, thank you for letting me share this with you all. Yeah, quick overview. This should be pretty quick. Just give you a little background on the study that was accomplished, as Levi mentioned, at the south side of the airport, really focusing on the drainage plan. So talk a little bit about the existing condition, what some of the study found for some proposed conditions, and then some next steps is what we're going to be looking at. And I'm sure Levi could make the study available to you all if you have any questions. So just to give some overview, again, we were looking at the overall southern site of the airport. So the existing hangars and existing detention pond, as well as future development areas that are available. This is an image of the existing detention pond that's present on the south side. This is currently providing both water quality treatment for those southern hangars, meeting our municipal separate storm sewer system permit obligations with the state of Colorado. It also provides flood control to make sure that we're being good to the folks downstream, that we're not having any negative impacts on the folks down there. In this existing condition, currently it's primarily just treating flows from these hangars that are on the south side of the site. So there's a swale on the north end and a swale on the south end that collects the runoff and brings it over to that pond. That current pond is sized for about what's flowing to it, so that's good. It's actually a little oversized for what's currently flowing to it. So there's a little room in the existing pond as it is. However, looking at a proposed condition where there's potential future development on the western portion of the southern part of the airport property, there's going to be more impervious surfaces, so concrete, rooftops, things that will increase the amount of runoff and potentially have pollutants in there, which would require an expansion of that southern pond. That's at least what we were proposing. So we looked at two different conditions. These are from some planning studies done by the airport, where there's one study where basically we take this northern portion, what's labeled as Basin B4 and Basin B3, and basically the north one will go to the northern swale, the southern one would go to the southern swale, and both of which would still flow to that same pond location. There's a second option that was looked at where we also had this kind of intermediate swale on the south side that just gives us a little more flexibility if we wanted, for how we would want to potentially phase or develop some of this future areas. The summary of what the study found is looking at approximately 89 acres, assuming that we're going to substantially increase the imperviousness. So again, increasing that concrete pavement surfaces, and based off of our allowable depth, so that we could still discharge into Likens Gulch, which is the receiving water body for the airport on this portion. We would need approximately 12.5 acre feet. And if we completely expanded this pond based off of our depth limitations and some other constraints, there's a new sanitary line that was installed. And then just the release rates that are required for this portion of the airport. If we met those, we'd need about 12.5 acre feet of a detention. The maximum that we could fit at this portion is about 7.5. So that leaves us about 5 to 6 acre feet that we would need to find kind of on that western portion as those future properties eventually developed. This is, again, a potential scenario that the consultants looked at, was potentially putting, again, some of those pond areas just over on that western side to provide a little bit of detention before getting to the main pond. There's also going to be some drainage improvements needed for actual conveyance, so making sure that the water gets to the pond that we'd want to build. That's an important part of drainage engineering, apparently. So we'd and construct some different channels and make sure that all the swales that are constructed on site are adequate to safely convey all of that flow. So some of the conclusions here, what the project accomplished is it really helped us better identify and understand what the conditions are on the southern part of the basin, which was a little bit of an unknown as we kicked off the study. I was able to really see what is actually happening on that southern portion of the hangars and to understand what our future detention needs are going to be based off of some proposed plans for expansion. We also wanted to understand the available capacity at the south pond. So if we built out that southern pond as big as we could based off of the constraints of the site, how much volume could we actually achieve? Unfortunately, we found that it wasn't enough to fully accomplish all the development, but that we were able to better understand what additional space, what additional detention requirements would we need. The other thing is that the consultants developed some models that we could continue to use in the future as we get some more defined plans to better understand what intermediate conditions, steps, basically what would we need to do as we develop, so we don't have to do this all necessarily at once, but we could really have a good understanding, good approach for investigating future projects for this portion of the site. Next steps, again, determine the amount of development that could be accommodated by whatever selected pond we choose to do by the existing pond. Again, it is a little oversized now, so there's likely a portion of development that could occur in the airport that could be served by the existing facilities without needing a substantial improvement. There is a lot of development that could happen, but there is some. We're not at the capacity yet. I think there's work that we could do as internal city staff to better understand what kind of release rates and really try to dial those in. Right, we used our typical code requirements, but as we do further studies and get more information, we could better define to get specific release rates that could potentially impact detention requirements that would impact how much volume we need to hold. And we need to identify what kind of drainage conveyance paths and potential locations for other storage opportunities on site. Again, to make it fit great so that everyone gets good use out of the property, but we could still meet our drainage requirements, our water quality requirements for the site. But all that seems very feasible given the initial study that we had. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions?
I do.
Malcolm?
Perfect. I do have a couple of quick questions. How many gallons does the pond hold, and is the water filtered or reused or pumped out? Because if you can reuse it, that's probably better than dumping it back into the ecosystem.
I'm not sure if I could do the acre feet to gallons.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'm sure I can calculate it. But okay.
I could give you a quick number here, but in terms of use, we do have water law requirements that we have to be in conformance with, which typically for our storm systems, we want those to be gravity flowed. So in the current system, it's all flown by gravity. There is no pumping or anything. It just naturally will flow and drain. That's what is also limiting our depth constraints, is so that it can all be a free-flowing system. Unfortunately, per water law, it's illegal for us to try to provide a beneficial use, to take the water and use it, because it's actually not water that we have the rights to use. Those rights belong to downstream users, so it is our obligation to detain it to a safe release rate and to provide adequate water quality, but to not try to capture and use that water, as that would be a violation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You bet. Yes.
When you say adequate, okay.
We need a cheat sheet for what button to hit.
No, I got it. It's just
All right.
below where I can touch.
I have a follow-up question with regard to the water quality. These are detention ponds, right?
They're technically called extended detention ponds
Okay.
for the water quality benefit, yeah.
So, and then you say hold the water so that it can flow at a acceptable rate out. So but you also mentioned that there could be contaminants in the water. So the contaminants are just going to flow through just at a different rate, and the contaminants aren't really filtered or treated. It's just flowing at a lower rate. Do I have that right?
So the way that they do receive treatment, the way that it receives treatment is through sedimentation processes. A lot of the contaminants are going to actually bind to the dirt. And as we hold the water, that's why we have to hold it for a long period of time to allow sedimentation to occur, so that pond will eventually fill up with sediment and debris that we periodically remove through maintenance and landfill that.
So that was my understanding of a detention pond, is that the water stays still, precipitates out, settles out. Okay.
Exactly, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions? Really appreciate your time.
And 4 million gallons
4
is about the size, yep.
You got it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All righty.
Right.
Next items. Continuing on with the airport update to remind us all where we are here in the agenda. Second item, I got just a quick information thing. And a lot of this was supposed to be last month, so I'm just kind of filling in the gaps here. March 6th, I participated in what Eric Dahl, who is the airport manager at Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport, is calling the Denver 5 quarterly meeting. He has taken upon himself to kind of get the top 5 general aviation airports in Colorado to come do a meeting there. So I headed down to Broomfield on the 6th. That all kind of came out of CDOT's labeling us as the top 5 GA airports and putting us under the purview, if you will, of House Bill 1235, which came out recently, which includes such things as voluntary noise abatement programs and transition to leaded fuel, stuff like that. So Eric thought it might be a great idea if we could make that a quarterly meeting, so we did that. We talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about our voluntary noise abatement programs, talked about the transitioning that we're doing to unleaded fuels and stuff like that. We also talked about a great deal of other little boring airport things and people and grants and stuff like that. But that was on March 6th. Any questions on that?
Yeah, what are the 5? I can guess most of them.
See if I can get them all off my head here. Erie, Centennial, Rocky Mountain Metro, Boulder, and us.
And not FNL.
No, we're
Okay,
the...
they're far enough north. Okay.
And of course, this is also, again, focused on general aviation, so it's very specific.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I just say thank you for your time in doing that. That is one of the building blocks toward the flight school discussions and getting fuel into the area in bulk and a lot of things.
And those meetings are something that we've been doing for a while. We've been kind of, catching here and there and back and forth. And we're just kind of trying to set them a little bit more, especially now since we've got more guidance from CDOT that we share alike. So we will move forward with those. On a related issue with that, well, yes, I'll talk about that now. It's kind of ties into a later part of voluntary the noise abatement issues. But also May 19th or 29th, depending on which email you believe, is going to be the next voluntary noise abatement meeting at Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. As discussed in the past, I'm trying to make kind of our efforts in conjunction with theirs, seeing as how so many of us, there's flight schools all over the region, so try to get a wider audience when we do our noise abatement information distribution and meetings with the flight schools. So we will be going, me and a representative from Aerosphere will be going down to that, which will be in the Mount Evan rooms down at Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport. That'll be coming up on, I'll clarify, either the 19th or the 29th here. Now, they sent 2 emails and they were a little confusing. Any questions on that? Yeah, I'm guessing it's the Monday one. We'll see.
Is that open to the public? Is that?
No, that's an invitation only thing.
Okay. Because I saw the communication from Centennial as well. No, that was for Metro. Where
Yeah.
they're going to select 8. They're going to select kind of almost like a board. Is that one?
At
Where
Centennial?
they were doing a call. Yeah, they've just put out a call for people to apply to that.
Oh, for their advisory board?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, not their advisory board. It's their noise.
Oh, yes. So Centennial does have a robust kind of noise group, kind of like Rocky Mountain. And it's kind of changed in what that looks like over the years. I think essentially they tie their kind of same thing into the board like we do, if I recall correctly.
But this one's at Metro and probably the 19th on a Monday. But not open to the public, but you'll be there.
Yes,
Did I get
this
that?
next
Okay.
meeting.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Airport updates. The third thing, and it was already kind of mentioned in comments earlier, CDOT did officially finally complete their economic impact study that they do. They try to do it every 5 years. It's been a bit, and it takes 2 years to do that because it's a big effort. While they were doing that, they sent representatives out here at the airport. They went to all the businesses. They got, employee records and stuff like that, and went down. So we did spend a little bit of time hanging out with them and helping them kind of fulfill their tasks. And that report is out. I do have copies of it if people would like it. I printed off some. But quick summary, 448 total jobs, $29.6 million in total payroll, $46 million in value added, going to $73.6 million in total business revenue. To my understanding, I asked when they released this, they used the in-plan model for economic forecasting, if it's of interest. And of course, I have little handouts that I can give out later for those who are interested. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, that's all I have for the general airport updates.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask Levi about under this portion? Anything specific? We've got questions that'll be coming up, but they're not on the agenda. Malcolm?
Can you tell us more about landing fee investigation you referenced in your newsletter at all?
The airport has been directed by City Council to look into landing fees for the funding of the airport, and that's kind of where that's at right now. I have a discussion with the city kind of what we're doing right now, so they want to ensure everybody that everyone will be involved in that process. There'll be lots of time to comment and stuff like that, and that's kind of where it is at the moment.
Thank you.
I heard that the lawsuit between the town of Superior and Jefferson County commissioners had been dismissed. I couldn't find like an official document. Can you deny or verify that?
To my understanding, and I did see communication involving that particular lawsuit was dismissed. That lawsuit included landing fees. I have not read the brief in its entirety, But I know it was dismissed prior to them hearing the case.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to the regulation on off-site landings, specifically to skydiving, and noting the difference between a human off-site landing and a parachute, a cutaway?
Oh.
You want to speak to that?
Yeah, the airport's got a pretty good relationship with Mile High Skydiving when it comes to off-site landings. Over the course of the time I've been here, I can count on one hand about how many people have actually landed off-site. The rules and regulations via the airport actually say it has to be a non-approved off-site landing. So you're allowed to land off-site if you have approval from the landowner. It's only when it's your land on land that you don't have approval from. Over the years, Mile High Skydiving has done a lot of outreach around the airport, particularly with the hazel bushes. And they do have permission from the hazel bushes on their farming land around the airport to land people there, which in that case, technically, they don't have to notify the airport. And again, they have in the past, none this year that I can recall. And also keep in mind that there's also cutaways instead of off-site landings. A cutaway is a parachute that if it's entangled, it's a safety issue, and a parachutist will cut it off and use their reserve. Cutaways, there's no rules or regulations regarding cutaways, so if you cut away and that cutaway lands somewhere else, that's also not really a reportable event.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I'm just looking at
No, I know. It's right there. There we go.
All right. Levi, I'd like to go back to something you said. I think you said, and I want to just clarify this. Did I hear you say that the city asked the airport to look into landing fees to fund the airport?
Yeah, to help fund the airport.
To help fund the
Yeah.
airport. So what's going on there? What's the plan to, I know that city council is doing some executive session, but if the council asks the airport / you to look into this, what's the plan there? And what's the
essentially just
progress?
researching landing fees. And this was actually a fairly easy lift for me because I was looking into researching landing fees last April.
Okay.
So I had the data on what all other airports in Colorado were already doing, what they were charging, how they were applying those fees. So really just organization and presentation of that information to the city council, and then kind of moving from there, kind of with a community engagement, more information finding, and then just kind of moving forward that direction.
Okay, so what's the next step as far as moving that forward?
I think next step is kind of just vetting out what exactly that would look like, what the procedure would be, I would suppose. That is all kind of, we're just fresh out of the executive session. That's kind of moving forward. There are meetings set up to discuss the next steps.
Okay, great, thanks.
Hey, Levi, are these fees for general aviation aircraft, like under 12,500 pounds?
So at the moment,
Because I've never heard of landing fees for aircraft under 12,500.
at the moment, there's nothing that's been set in stone as far as how the fees will be applied. We're just been directed by City Council to look into landing fees.
And would it be to Longmont Airport tenants also?
And again, nothing has been set in stone as to how those fees would be applied, just to the fact that we've been directed to look into the fees.
Yeah, because personally, I think that would devalue every hangar at the airport. And, it's something, I've been around airports for 40 years, and I've never heard of that for general aviation. And, so anyway, I think this board really needs to be on top of if that's the direction the city council is thinking of going.
Do you, what is the timeline?
The specific timeline, again, isn't set in stone. I would assume as we get into summer, we'll start seeing more of that engagement. We'll start seeing more of the conversations that the city has promised that we'll have with the community.
Thank you. One more Q&A. There's been discussion in the past about having an air traffic control tower at our airport.
Okay.
Would you take a minute to explain if we're eligible for that?
Okay. I can certainly talk about that a little bit. Air traffic control towers are something which periodically will be built at airports across the United States, as we know. They exist. Right now, I would say that we lack several kind of qualifications to potentially get a tower. We're really not of the size that you see most airports tower. We're general aviation, so there's another big down line. Getting a GA airport with a tower is a little higher end. That's a little higher sell too. Perhaps more significant than any of this would be need or the FAA's willingness to actually consider something like that. Of course, all that would have to be considered by approved by the FAA, having a control tower. They have made that pretty clear in the past that that's not something they're interested in. Of course, things can change. There has been a lot of talk recently about the new remote control tower concept. There was an experimental program that's been going on for the last few years across the nation. There was an airport in Virginia, and then there's one still in Fort Collins that has a remote tower. A year or so back, the FAA decided that they wanted to abandon that program. They weren't liking how it was showing out. Fort Collins themselves, to their credit, investing in the technology, and they really want to have a control tower up there. So they're keeping that afloat right now with their own personal funds. The remote control tower concept. That's been proposed a half year too. Again, something that could potentially always be in the future, depending on how the technology fleshes out, on how the politics flesh out, and stuff like that. I would say from a realistic standpoint, you're not probably going to be looking at that anytime soon. Technology would have to be proven, need would have to be seen. The FAA would have to have a rather drastic change in course on how they're applying that and approving those towers. So again, something that's let's talk about in the future. For the foreseeable future, that would be not likely, I would say.
Any questions?
Great. What's a remote control tower?
Excellent question. A remote control tower.
Beyond the obvious, but.
Yeah, no, excellent question. I'm glad you asked. Remote control tower is next generation, if you will. It's something that we've been talking about kind of, tongue in cheek for the last 15 years. Is it going to come? So with advances in technology, internet connections, high fidelity cameras, the concept is we can build a pole with a bunch of really high tech cameras with artificial intelligence, can track aircraft, can label them. You can essentially have a control tower anywhere without controllers actually have to be sitting in it. I was fortunate enough to get a tour of the remote control tower up at Fort Collins, and it is pretty amazing. I can see how that technology could be applied in a safe manner. The screens are massive. It's very easy to see planes. They can zoom in on planes. The computer recognizes movements in the sky and identifies planes. It's a pretty neat concept. It has been used with some success in Europe. There are a few active remote control towers. I was fortunate enough to get to speak with a gentleman who just set one up in Auckland in New Zealand. That was an amazing discussion. Again, he stepped me through his technology, and it was pretty impressive. Having said that, that's kind of going down another, path to just the technology stuff instead of the applicability potentially here. But it's amazing technology and definitely something to keep eye on in the future.
Thanks.
I also got to tour that before it went live and then fly it a lot, and it is impressive. I'd love to work there.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't know if you can still tour it.
To my understanding, they don't offer open tours. It's kind of an invitation thing.
Yeah, it's impressive.
So, and yeah, I'm not sure. And, and that whole airport's under new management now also, so
Right.
it all's up to them, I'm sure.
Yeah, so on these massive screens, 12 of them, they've got your waypoints identified. They've got, so you can get your scale, your reference when you're looking at it. And then when it first opened, they wanted us to fly it as much as we could. And we would call out certain distances coming into it, certain distances as we left, so that they could get things calibrated. And it was a lot of fun. So it's a really cool concept. And the idea was rolling your staff. So we could have staff here in Colorado at that and switch over to cameras in Virginia or Auckland or LAX. We could roll with the traffic, and you could have people in other areas being able to support, sort of like the call center distribution idea, that a hurricane hits Houston and knocks out United Airlines there. They're also in Chicago, they're also in Denver. So it was that concept. It's a cool concept. I'd love to see it keep going. And I don't know what crippled it, but they did completely tear down the one in Virginia that they were using, and then this was the second one. So it's really cool that they've kept it up, and hopefully it is going to be the future, because it's really a nice concept. Any other questions for Levi? All right, let's go to our annual report. Will we be able to include the annual report information that was provided to us?
So, I'm sorry, what was the question?
For our annual report, will we be able to include that information in our annual report?
Oh,
or
regarding...
For ours to the city.
Oh,
So
for
I'm on
the
to
economic impact study?
Yeah.
Okay, there's this interesting question. So, as we're getting into thinking about annual report, this board traditionally does essentially 2 annual reports, if you will. There is an annual report, which is a function of the city, which all departments have to do. That for us is essentially a 1-page document. So it's very cut and dry. Here's the projects we did, yada, 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 stuff like that. The annual report traditionally that the airport board does is a much deeper document that talks essentially about whatever you on the airport board wants to talk about. And that's kind of had traditionally, again, kind of presented to the city council, members of the public, as a function of the airport advisory board instead as a function of the city. And I assume that respect, since it is the airport advisory board's document, you may do what you like with it.
Okay. And then your report is due by June?
I'll double check with that. But yes, that is on my radar of stuff to talk about at my next meeting with management. Okay,
perfect. Yep. Historically, I have spearheaded the news from the airport and worked to gather information to put into that report, which included mercy flights, medical flights. We get the annual wildland wildfire training with the helicopters, statistics, numbers, the items that instead of just dry numbers, puts a face on it and explains what you're seeing going on in the area. And then in the case of this year's report, it would be a look ahead to Sundance Film Festival and some of the things that we can anticipate seeing additional activity at our airport.
And to interject a little bit right there.
When are the helicopters coming?
Yeah, the helicopters are coming, actually. I just got the phone call from them today. They're planning on being here the 16th and the 17th. They're dialing back the presence that they normally do. But something that the airport is always very proud to host. Traditionally, we host the Colorado National Guards and the local Army bases is firefighter training every year. For the helicopter units, they go up into the mountains and they practice doing drops of water from their helicopters. And they use our airport as a base of operations during that. So it's very nice, and it's an excellent community thing. I've never met nicer pilots. They have a great habit of letting kids look at their helicopters and talking to anyone who wants to. So it's a really nice thing for the folks that happen to come across their path.
And is that April 16th, 17th, or May?
That is April 16th and 17th.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And before you go beyond that, I haven't done the noise abatement program yet.
Okay,
Update.
please.
Yeah, so I noticed
Sorry.
we skipped the annual report, so I wanted to make sure that we actually talked about the noise abatement stuff.
Yeah, we'll switch back over to that first item.
I just have, honestly, I've covered a lot of what was already on that already because it tied into other items that we were talking about. I do have a couple things I want to make official note of in the meeting. We did officially publish a communications plan for the Vance Brand noise abatement procedures. I apologize. I had them printed off for last time and I forgot them. They're sitting on my desk. You may, however, go onto the airport's website, and they are already published on the airport's website. The communication plan was something that I had been working on for since probably Christmas time. Essentially just a document which tells the community what we as an airport do with our voluntary noise abatement procedures, how we advertise it, how we get it out there, the meetings we do, the publications we do, the initiatives we do, and stuff like that. Very fortunate, side note, that we did do that, because just a couple of weeks ago, the Colorado Department of Transportation decided to make them mandatory. So that was a happy conversation when they called me, because I just said, perfect. We've already done that. Does this look good? And they said, yes, that looks amazing. Thank you. So that is officially posted on the website. Any questions on that under the noise section?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Levi. Just two questions on that. One, to clarify, you said the state of Colorado recently mandated that all airports come up with a voluntary noise abatement program?
No, so essentially they mandated that the airports which they had designated must have a voluntary noise abatement procedures or program, which were the top 5. That they must then do some kind of document which categorizes how they communicate that. So we were fortunate to kind of be a little bit ahead of the ball and had one of those ready before they.
So again, they're mandating a voluntary noise abatement program.
No, so what they're mandating is House Bill 1235 calls for high volume general aviation airports to have a voluntary noise abatement program. And they're telling the airports which are required to do that to have a communications plan.
Noted. Thank you. And then from your experience over the last, I guess, from your experience generally with voluntary noise abatement programs, can you talk a little bit more about what techniques you found more effective as you've been working on this communications plan and the engagement that you've had?
Certainly. So there's many techniques which airport managers are, allowed to use, which fits within the realm of federal regulation and laws and stuff like that. By far, of course, and I feel this is probably true for most things, public engagement and community engagement are kind of the top ones that tend to do the most good. That's why it's always really good to have the air show, to have, positive communication around that. The voluntary noise procedures in themselves are a kind of a great public thing too, to actually tell people, hey, look, here's what we are actually doing, what we're actually asking pilots of to help mitigate these issues.
Within the different types of public engagement, I mean, there are a lot of different ways to define that. So I'm just genuinely curious, like what you've found has resonated more, or what's been received best. What types of communication strategies?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, from my own insight, and I've dealt with voluntary noise abatement procedures, all over the country.
Sure.
At various airport. A broad approach is best. Having a good website which talks about it, doing events, having conversations, doing stuff like the Airport Advisory Board meeting where we have a standing item which is about noise abatement program. That's amazing. That's really great. Something else which I'm really glad that we've been doing, because again was essentially something that fleshed out in House Bill 1235, is having recurring meetings where voluntary noise abatement procedures are talked about. So we're already fulfilling that need too. Definitely venues for the public. Again, this is an amazing spot. People can come and talk as they have about it, are particularly useful. I would say, the short answer to your question is a broad swath of the engagement that we can do.
Okay. And then for the education and events that you're doing, is the target audience pilots and other kind of visitors to the airport, or is it other people in the community to let them know? Like, is it to share what the program guidelines are, or is it to share that you have a program?
So from a
to people who
practical-
are not pilots and not using the airport.
Yeah. From a practical standpoint, the voluntary noise abatement procedures are good, but it's something that you don't really need to target towards the public as far as details go. If they want to know the details, they're readily available, happy to share those. As a non-flying public, though, will often find that hard to digest and understand what's going on. That's side of things is what we really focus on educating pilots about. So that's why we have the airport newsletters, which address that on a monthly basis. That's why we have the posters. That's why we have the signs. That's why we have all these communications which go directly to pilots. That's why we do the meetings, and that's why we're trying to make those meetings more inclusive with more flight schools. So more and more pilots know about our voluntary noise abatement procedures. When it gets to informing the public, that's when we're looking at this side of stuff, when we're looking at public meetings, and that's where that communication plan comes in. That side of things is really focused towards the public, because that's saying, look, here's what we have if you would like to see it. Now here's how we're getting the word out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Excellent question. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say that aviation is for the constant learner. Everything, not a lot changes, especially the dynamics of flight, but the equipment and the requirements and the dynamics of being in aviation is a constant. And you're constantly learning new things and new regulations, new approaches to things. So education is the key. And with anything in life where people say, "Oh, I didn't know about that," that's really what we're battling. Is we don't want them to say, "We didn't know you had a noise abatement process. We didn't know you had specifics about how to fly your patterns." And Levi's, I think the goal is saturation of information, and then if the public is interested, it can be provided in a easier format. The city did hold a listening meeting like 10 years ago. Sean held it, and it's on YouTube. You can find it on YouTube. But they did hold a listening session, and we are in essence holding that here through public comment. So again, the pilots on the field, their intentions are they are your neighbors, and it's educating the pilots who come to visit, and then the flight school instructors to just keep nagging their students, tighten it up, tighten it up, tighten it up. So it's really a big process, but education is always going to be the best. I do know that Levi has gone ahead with a coin program.
Oh, yeah, that was my
know
next thing.
I have one coin, I think it's from Front Range for going out there. I do have one. But talk about that.
Okay, that's my last item under my last official item under the noise abatement program updates. So that's an initiative which I proposed to the city a while back, which the communication team really kind of took off with and said they really thought was a great idea. So, grateful for them for a lot of support. So I pitched to them, what about the idea of having essentially a Good Neighbor Award, or, well, that's what we're going to call it. We're going to call it the Good Neighbor Award, essentially. So kind of within those realms of the voluntary noise abatement procedures, what pilots potentially are exhibiting that the best, and we could have an award which essentially recognizes them. So that's taken off. I put in an order for some challenge coins based on the city's challenge coins, and they were very helpful with that. So we're going to have some nice, really neat-looking specific crossover City of Longmont / Vance Brand Airport challenge coins that we will, let's say, Good Neighbor Award on them, and we will kind of give those out as that reward. And that's the idea behind that. As far as getting that award out, still fleshing out the exact details of how that's going to happen. We still got to wait a couple months for the challenge coins, so our awards aren't here yet. I'm thinking that most likely the kind of the fairest way across the board to do that is to get recommendations from essentially the general public to say, hey, recommend a plane, recommend a pilot from everyone. Take recommendations, and then based on that, kind of award that instead of, I think it would be unfair if I just sat there and gave out rewards or one person did. So take essentially recommendations for the award.
I saw that look on your face. I got it at Front Range, and it was for doing the fly up to get the annual maps and directories. And
I didn't know that they did one.
They
That's
did. I got
interesting.
one
I
one
see,
year
I was
from
thinking
David
we were
Lane.
doing like a first
Saw
here,
you looking
so
at
I
me
was-
like you didn't believe me. Matthew, did you have other questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more follow-up question. Levi, I was curious, again, forgive my ignorance on some of the airport terminology here. Are stop-and-go landings different from touch-and-go landings?
Did I use the term stop and go?
No, both are used on the general aviation noise abatement procedures.
Okay.
On the
So
website.
for all intents and purposes, they're the same. So to get into the specifics of what the difference is, a stop and go landing would be where you essentially come in, land fully. The aircraft comes to some kind of a full stop, whether it taxis off the runway and backs and takes off, or in some absurd case where it stop on the runway and then take off again. That would be a stop and go. Touch and go would just be where they come in, land, and they're still rolling and they take off again.
Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that was a meaningful distinction on the website there. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
There are regulations in different phases of training that you have to do a stop and go. You have to leave,
Or
taxi
sometimes
back.
they're done for safety.
Yeah, or for safety. And then the ones that you see that are more repetitive are definitely touch and go. And that's to practice landing and taking off. We are up to action items, which I consider to be our annual report, really, for me, and then we'll start working on that. And then, does anybody else have anything they'd like to bring up on this portion of our agenda? All right, thank you. We are up to our final public invited to be heard. Again, 5 minutes. I wasn't running a timer before, I was just kind of watching, so I'll do a timer. And 5 minutes, name, address, and direct the board, please, if you'd like to speak.
John Grunsfeld, 229 Airport Road, serving a public service announcement. So I am somewhat of an advocate for a control tower at the Longmont Airport because it would serve a very important safety function of adjudicating all the aircraft in the pattern. It would probably also reduce the volume of training at the airport because a control tower is allowed to say full stop landings only because the pattern is full. And that would put Longmont Airport in a category that it makes it slightly less desirable for people to come and just freely go round and round. So to that point, whoops. I had the FAA requirements for being a control tower up just a moment ago. But basically, to meet the criteria for a control tower, the airport has to be a public access airport, which the Longmont Airport is open to the public. It is a public airport, 24/7, 365. The airport must be recognized and included in the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, which I believe we also are. It has to have assurances and covenances that provide assurances that it will continue operating for a sufficient period of time to make the investment worthwhile, which we also have, our grant assurances. So those are meet the criteria, so we meet the criteria. The second is to demonstrate the need for a tower. Okay, so number one is traffic density, and that's a discussion with the FAA. Being in the Front Range has the traffic density so that from a safety viewpoint, control towers are meritorious. The real question is, does the Vance Brand Airport, and our traffic has been ever increasing, so I think that's a reasonable thing to discuss with the FAA. A higher number of operations generally suggest a greater need for a tower. Safety and efficiency. So safety is obvious. Efficiency is getting planes in and getting planes out effectively. And we currently have a challenge that aircraft, especially jet aircraft, prop aircraft have trouble getting in because of the pattern work that when they come in controlled by center under an IFR control and are turned over to the local airport vicinity, the number of planes in the pattern often make it very difficult for airplanes to get in safely. Okay, so then how do you get a tower? You have to apply to the FAA contract tower program. There are FAA-owned towers, like at Denver, Chicago, LA, the big airports, and most of the small airports, general aviation airports, have contract tower program. So you have to apply. The FAA will then do a cost-benefit analysis, and if they deem that it's meritorious, the FAA will give a grant to the airport to set up a contract tower. Now, Loveland was part of the Virginia and Loveland Fort Collins remote tower program, but when that program ended, and it was actually started at the NASA Ames Research Center at Moffett Field in California, demonstrated it, showed it to the FAA did the experiment went through its funding, and then Congress terminated that funding after the experiment period. The FAA had comments, some good, some bad. Loveland Fort Collins decided they wanted to keep the tower, and it's actually not a remote tower. They actually have people in there all the time, 2 people at any given time, right there on the field, and it's more of a portable tower than a remote tower. And Fort Collins, Loveland, decided that it was worth it for the safety to have that. So the FAA would then fund it. There is the potential down the road, as Levi described, for remote towers. That's currently just not a thing. I think it will be, but at the moment, it's not. And then the FAA will help site that tower where it should be on the field. So if we don't ask, we don't know. Thanks.
Chair Jordan, members. Scott Stewart, 229 Grand Street. We spoke a little bit earlier about off-site landings for skydiving. Just to be clear, City Chapter 13.39, Longmont Municipal Code, page 29, line 6, unauthorized off-site landings of skydivers shall be reported to the airport manager by the reasonable skydiving operator within 24 hours of learning of the event. Page number 28, line 4, airport manager shall designate the authorized parachute landing area. All parachute landings outside of this area are unauthorized unless specifically authorized by the airport manager. I think that says it pretty clearly that there should be a report when somebody drops out of the sky and isn't within that authorized area. Also, we were talking about, or it was mentioned that we didn't hear of anything else. 316 at about 9:30 a.m., that was another off-site landing.
Thank you.
My name is Stephen Bragg. I live 6813 St. Vrain Road. I'm about a mile from the airport. I also recently built a hangar at the airport. It was a sizable investment, and my wish from the council would be that nothing is done that diminishes that investment in any way. I'm a strong believer the airport's a huge asset for our community in many different ways, and I'm a supporter.
Congratulations and thank you. Next.
Hey, board, it's Matt Menza, 2235 Parkview Drive. I want to get this on the public record. Longmont Airport is an amazing airport. It's one of the most beautiful locations on the Front Range. It brings $73 million to the local economy per the Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division. That's public. I think they've been not addressing that or talking to the council about that. We have opportunities here in this airport that are phenomenal. Sundance is coming to Boulder. the overflow possibilities of having smaller aircraft and turboprops come to Longmont and do business here and bring in a lot of money, a lot of help to the local businesses would be phenomenal. The airport is home to named after a former astronaut. There's 2 astronauts on the field. It's a very amazing place with a lot of strategic importance in terms of where it's located, in terms of potential disasters. For example, the 2013 flood, humanitarian capabilities, a training place for the helicopters and the Army National Guard to do rescue services. It's an amazing place, and so what I'd like to see is this airport advisory board start defining what your mission is. Are you for the airport or are you against it? What is your plan to support the economy and the airport in terms of your relationship between this board and the city council? And the reason I ask that, because it's very ambiguous, and there's a lot of indicators that there's new board members here that have been known to be serial complainers of the airport and have publicly said that they want to have the airport land used for something else. So the city council has gotten rid of professional pilots like myself, who was on the board, and replaced them with people who are known to complain about the airport. So what is your purpose? We have one of the most beautiful airports in the Front Range. And what I see happening is we're giving leases to airport individuals that most people would never sign. You're disenfranchising business at the airport by not giving a signable lease to businesses. In my opinion, the city is obstructing the ability for the airport to grow through increasing or improving the FBO. So I want to make it publicly clear, this is a very important, very beautiful, very incredible airport. And what I see is a city council overtly suppressing and hurting the airport. And that gentleman just spent a lot of money on his hangar. And if we don't change direction and start getting a clear, defined mission for the board, then I think we're going to be in trouble. And so I think putting people on the board, advisory board, who are known to be against the airport is really unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. It's pretty sad for the city. We have a lot of opportunity in the city, a lot of opportunity from the airport. I've been in aviation for 26 years. There's more noise in this airport, or in this town, from cars, trucks, and trains than there are airplanes. This is a very quiet place to fly. And so that narrative that there's a problem with noise is just not true. There's going to be noise from airports, but it's not that bad here. We need to focus on what's really important, which is our economy, our small businesses, and the fact that this is a great place for aviation to thrive and bring in lots of money to our local businesses. So good luck. I would like to see you guys start defining who you are and what you want to do for this city and this community, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Chad Renicky, 907 Champion Circle, airport user, EAA president presently. I'd like to tag on to that. It's a great airport, but one of the big things is this area, this town, our school system has a huge STEM program, and the Innovation Center on the south end of town has a huge aviation program in it. And we have, I think there's about 200 kids in that aviation program through the St. Vrain Valley school system. And then we also have in town the Civil Air Patrol. And those are young kids that are getting into aviation and want to go into the service too. So I think if we need to do whatever we can to keep the airport, because I think it's not only for people like us that are here, but it's for our future kids that are learning to fly to go into the service, kids that are learning to fly the big jets that take us all over the world. It's a very important part of our society, and I think one thing that we need to work on is that, we need to look at more, I think, at what we have in common and make the things work together. I agree that the traffic out there is is more than I'd like to see. The traffic patterns are bigger than I'd like to see, but I'd also like to say that I don't know how anybody that's in the traffic pattern could fly over someone's house knowing that that's where their house is, because I know this city very well, being a former firefighter for the city of Longmont. I drew the maps. So I know the city very well. If you gave me your address, when I'm in the air flying, I don't think I'd have time to go looking for that house. My eyes are outside looking for other aircraft, and I've got waypoints of coming into land to get into the pattern to land. I'm not even looking for my house. So, but yeah, if we can all work together to figure out how we can all be good neighbors, I would like that. I think it's important. We need to have advocates for our airport, which I think we have here, and maybe we need to make a resolution or a motion that Levi goes and physically goes to these other airports and schools and talks to them about the pattern and the effect that it is having on our town, because those are people that are outside of our city that are affecting our city, and that needs to change. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public invited to be heard. It's time for comments, and I'm going to go ahead and take the first spot. I wanted to say about the Innovation Center that the Space Symposium, the 40th Space Symposium, was just held in Colorado Springs this week. My employer was there. I didn't get to be there. That's a bummer. It's sponsored by every aerospace, exploration, satellite, military, everybody is at this conference. It's at the Broadmoor. And our kids from St. Vrain at the Innovation Center did a drone show for them. And they did the space shuttle in orbit. They did the International Space Station. They did the Space Symposium logo. Our kids from here did that. And it's just an amazing thing what they can do and what they are doing and what they're learning, so they can go through the drone program in school and get their certificate. They can also do ground school for a pilot's license and test for their written for their private pilot license through our school district at the Innovation Center building right here. So incredibly proud of what they're doing. And again, just our town is tied to aviation. We've got the Air Traffic Control Center here that there are only 22 of those in the U.S., and one of them is right here on 17th and Hover, employs 400 people, manages 2.2 million flights a year. A lot of people work there. And that's been here since 1961. And we have a rich history in aviation in this town. And we actually have 3 astronauts at the airport. Dr. Grunsfeld, Vance Brand, and John, and I can't ever think of his name. Jim Voss, there you go. So we actually can tout 3, and then we do have a lot of, whoops, that was the timer on y'all. Sorry, that should be on me. We have a lot of commercial airline pilots. We've got military pilots, and we've got pilots in training out of our town. Quite a few of them, and some that I know who have gone to the airlines now that were my kids' peers. So it is exciting, and we do have a lot going on here. And we are an aviation town. Doesn't mean we get sloppy and careless. It means we get tighter, because that is the nature of aviation. Is there's not a lot of room for monkeying around. I wanted to ask Levi on the discussion about a tower, assuming we'd only be talking about a portable tower. Have you gone down the road with the FAA at all to find out what we would have to do? I know you did on landing fees. Did you do that on the tower as well?
Yeah, I've had preliminary discussions with the FAA regarding that. And at that time, they made it rather clear to me that they didn't want to be considering that. Of course, as we move forward, we can always revisit with them and kind of see how things change. But I did make the ask of the FAA kind of what they thought of that, and they told me no. So again, yeah, that's something we can always look at in the future. But right now, their opinion isn't very high of that idea.
For what reason?
Essentially, we don't have the size. We don't have, what they're looking for in an airport. They're focusing on other things. Fort Collins, it was kind of barely on their radar to begin with, and they're kind of still letting that go forward. And again, there wasn't an official application. It was a conversation I had with the FAA, the representatives at the airport district office, and kind of fleshing this out. And they kind of shook their head. But I'll continue to have that conversation with them moving forward, too.
Thank you. Board members, questions? I'll look this way. Questions? Observations? Anything you'd like to speak about? All good? Would you like to make any other comments? Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just giving the board a chance there before jumping in. I heard a couple comments and questions about landing fees and the executive session. Levi handled those just fine. I just wanted to note that when more information is available, be more than happy to sit down with board members to share any more context that would be relevant. Staff's looking into a few things following that executive session, and that same offer goes for others who are interested in learning more about that process. Once more information is available, we'll make sure that that is shared, and I have no doubt that this board will be asked for input on that.
We appreciate that. We always have something to say. Seems. Any other comments or observations? Yes. Let's see here.
Yeah.
I just ask that the council give us proper time to digest any type of landing fees, if there are any, just in case we have any comments. There wasn't time last time to discuss the purchase or development of a land. So I just request the council respect this board.
Last call. All right. Anything else from you, Levi?
Should be good. We get Steve out here on time.
Yes, get Steve to DIA. And with that, we will adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.